My roommate, Steven, got into fights and street races for me. The day he confessed his feelings, everyone was shocked that he'd actually fallen for a guy. Until I saw him holding my sister, Claire, in his arms, laughing about me. Me like a guy? That's disgusting. And just like that, I became the gay guy everyone despised. Later, a new guy transferred to our school and fell for me at first sight. That's when Steven completely lost it. I was a little stunned when Steven called. It was the first time he'd reached out in half a month. It's my birthday today. You coming? His lazy voice cut through the loud music in the background. I paused. I didn't know it was, "I'll be right there." Steven just grunted in response. He gave me the address and hung up. I rushed out the door, my mind racing about what to get him for a birthday present. This was Steven's first birthday since we started dating. I was still worrying about his gift as I walked up to the door of the private room at the bar. But the moment I pushed the door open, a familiar male voice stopped me in my tracks. "David is your boyfriend. What are you doing hugging me?" Hearing my name, I instinctively froze. Steven had his arm around my sister, Claire, and frowned slightly. "Don't use the word boyfriend. It makes me sick. If he didn't look a little bit like you, I wouldn't have even given him a second glance. Gay guys are just perverts, aren't they?" My body went rigid. It felt like I couldn't even process what he was saying. So, Steven was just using me as a stand-in for Claire. Is that why he got with me? The next second, Claire turned her head slightly and our eyes met. Speak of the devil and David appears. She laughed as a few people next to her pulled me in front of everyone without another word. The crowd started jeering. "See? What does that make you, David?" I looked up and met Steven's indifferent gaze. He sat there coolly, holding Claire, with no intention of explaining himself. Someone else twisted the knife. "You had no idea, did you? The disgusted look on Steven's face whenever he talked about you with us. Didn't you try to kiss him once and get rejected?" My eyes shot wide open, my face turning pale as I looked at the person speaking. Steven was so grossed out he couldn't eat a single bite of dinner that afternoon. After he finished, the onlookers erupted in laughter. I mechanically turned my head to look at Steven. "Steven, is that what you think, too?" But he just curled his lip into a faint smile. "It's the truth." Steven chewed on a piece of ice and raised an eyebrow. "David, it's just like you see. Claire's back, so I'm dumping you." I still hadn't recovered from the massive shock, but I at least knew I was being humiliated. So I picked up the glass in front of me and threw the drink in Steven's face. "You're a fucking scumbag." Then I kicked him hard. The next second, one of Steven's friends punched me without holding back. "You've got some nerve, asshole. You dare to hit him?" Claire quickly wiped Steven's face and shot me a reproachful look as I fell to the ground. Steven smirked, got up, and looked down at me. "You can get lost now. Are we even?" Before I could make another move, Steven had his friends drag me out of the bar. Night fell, and it suddenly started to rain. The downpour grew heavier, soaking me to the bone. Walking in the rain, I thought back to the day Steven confessed to me. The boy had been so wild and confident. "Hey, I need to tell you something." "Yeah, I like you. Will you be with me?" "But I'm a guy and you're a guy. I don't care if you're a guy or a girl. I just like you." It was all a lie. My eyelashes trembled, and a drop of water, rain or a tear, I couldn't tell which, hit the ground. Inside the bar, Claire noticed Steven staring blankly at the door and nudged his shoulder. "What's wrong? Can't bear to see him go? You didn't actually fall for David for real, did you?" Steven snapped back to reality with a sneer. "Did you come back just to piss me off?" With that, he gently bit Claire's lower lip. "A girl's lips. This is what I like," Steven told himself. Claire wrapped her arms around his neck and whispered in his ear. "Then let me make it up to you. Okay?" Steven let out a low laugh, then picked Claire up and left. Meanwhile, I walked into my family's house looking like a drowned rat, only to be met with my stepmom's sarcasm. "Well, you're certainly acting more and more like a young master of this family, aren't you? Not coming home half the night. Where were you having fun?" The maids and staff all shot me mocking glances. This family that had never accepted me, combined with the pain Stephen had inflicted, hit with this double blow, I suddenly felt utterly exhausted. The next day, I applied to live in the dorms, away from everyone I didn't want to see. But there were some coincidences I just couldn't avoid. I was just trying to grab some takeout for lunch when I ran into Stephen and his crew. "What are you doing here?" I was waiting at the counter for my food when Stephen came out of a private room and we bumped right into each other. The accusation in his tone couldn't have been more obvious. "None of your damn business," I said, not wanting to deal with him. Claire followed him out. Her expression was strange, her tone sarcastic. "David, are you stalking us because you can't let go? I never thought a guy could be more paranoid than a girl. Or maybe, is this how your kind of people are?" Apparently, Stephen thought the same. After Claire spoke, he frowned. His eyes filled with repulsion as he looked at me. "This is a restaurant. This is a public place." I looked away, my voice flat. It was my way of telling them this was just a coincidence. It felt like my sadness had morphed into a toxic exhaustion. I didn't have the energy to argue with them anymore. The bruise on the corner of my mouth hadn't even faded yet. I couldn't afford to provoke someone like Stephen. "Sir, your shrimp fried rice is ready." The cashier's voice pulled me out of my predicament. After nodding my thanks, I ignored them both and turned to leave. But the whole time, Stephen was staring at me, and his gaze was getting more and more intense. I couldn't help but speed up, but Stephen ran up and stopped me anyway. "David." Stephen blocked my path. He seemed to be grasping for something to say. "Aren't you allergic to seafood?" I let out a rare, sarcastic laugh. "The one with the seafood allergy is Claire." Stephen's lips pressed together, speechless. But as I tried to walk around him again, he grabbed my arm. "Don't you have anything you want to ask me?" I pulled my arm away and paused for a few seconds. I finally asked the question. "Why did you humiliate me in front of everyone on your birthday? If you wanted to break up, you could have just said so." Our eyes met. Stephen's lips were tight, as if the words were hard to say. A restless breeze blew, but my heart was frozen solid. I heard Stephen say, "Claire doesn't like you. You and your mom are the ones who destroyed her family." The last flicker of light inside me died out. After a long moment, my calm tone turned lifeless. "So, you got with me from the very beginning just to get revenge for Claire?" Stephen was silent. I nodded. Of course. It was normal for no one to ever like me. "I get it." I picked up my food and walked away. My eyes skimmed past Claire, who was standing at the door. Her gaze was filled with hatred for me. It wasn't until I reached the corner that I saw Stephen in my peripheral vision, still standing there, looking in my direction. Inappropriately, I remembered. It used to always be me standing there, waiting for him. On the day of the school's anniversary celebration, I hadn't planned on going, but my roommate dragged me along. A lot of people were dressed to the nines, hoping to find a date. Amidst the glitzy atmosphere, I stood quietly in a corner, out of place in my plain white shirt. Occasionally, guys and girls would look my way, some with contempt, others with curiosity. Just as I was starting to feel uncomfortable and was about to leave, Claire blocked my path. She was holding a small plate with a few appetizer balls on it. "David, I haven't had a chance to properly catch up with you since I got back." I looked up at her. "I thought what happened the other day was your welcome home gift to me." Claire's nonchalant tone made it seem like she thought I was an idiot who couldn't tell right from wrong. Claire flicked her hair, and her eyes suddenly darted to the side. She smiled. "That was nothing. This is..." Before I could understand what she meant, I saw red blotches start to appear on her face. She wasn't faking her discomfort. It was clearly a seafood allergy, and the symptoms were just starting to show. "Claire, what are you trying to do?" I frowned and took a step closer, a bad feeling creeping over me. Sure enough, the next thing I knew, Claire collapsed onto a table, then slid to the floor. The commotion was loud enough to draw the attention of everyone there, including Stephen. "Claire." Stephen rushed over and held her. She hadn't completely passed out yet and buried her face in his chest. "Stephen, I feel so sick. I think I'm having an allergic reaction." Stephen brushed her hair aside and saw the rash. His voice was softer than I had ever heard it. "How could you accidentally eat seafood?" I'll take you to the hospital right now. Okay? The plate hadn't broken, and the shrimp balls were still sitting perfectly on it. Claire pointed a finger at it. Her voice was weak, and it sounded like she was crying from the pain. David, there was shrimp in those. Why did you give them to me? I haven't done anything to you since I came back. Stephen's head snapped up to look at me almost instantly. His eyes were overflowing with rage. Claire, are you really willing to risk this much just to frame me? Are you sick in the head? I looked down at Claire, a humorless smile on my lips. But Claire didn't need to explain. She just hid in Stephen's arms and cried. He was worried her condition would get worse. He forced his gaze away from me, picked her up, and left. That night, Claire sent me a video. She was lying in a hospital bed, holding Stephen's hand. Stephen, I really feel awful. Stephen held her hand down to stop her from moving. He coaxed her softly, don't scratch, be good. It'll be better in a little bit. Claire cried softly. I could see that while her discomfort was real, she had also achieved her goal. The heartache in Stephen's eyes was practically melting into water. Stephen, should I have not come back? Why is David treating me like this the moment I return? Stephen's hand, gripping the iron bed rail, had veins popping out as if they were about to burst. He was clearly furious. It's not your fault. It's David. His sexuality is already abnormal. What makes you think his mind is right? When he talked about me, his tone was filled with undisguised disgust and mockery. The video ended there. I lit a cigarette, only realizing now that I had never even thought about explaining anything to Stephen. The sad truth was, I subconsciously knew he wouldn't believe me anyway. I vaguely remembered that after Stephen and I got together, I once told him, I realized my sexuality wasn't normal a long time ago. He had raised an eyebrow, his tone meaningful. So you were already bent. Back then, I never imagined that this would become the weapon Stephen used to hurt me now. The chaos of the day finally came to an end. After finishing my cigarette, I dragged my exhausted body to bed and quickly fell asleep. The next morning, on my way to class, the weather was heavy with the rumble of distant thunder, creating a repressive atmosphere. I kept feeling people's eyes darting toward me as I walked by. Confused, I ran into my roommate at the bottom of the academic building. You're not going to take the day off? What? I asked, puzzled. You haven't seen the video? His troubled expression told me that I was in some kind of trouble. My roommate pulled up the video and handed me his phone. Stephen. The people in the video were me and Stephen. What do you want? Stephen looked at me with a half smile. My ears were a little red, but I met his gaze with a burning intensity. I spoke softly, I want to kiss you. Stephen gave a playful smile. That eager? He said, pinching my chin. He didn't say yes, but he didn't say no. I took it as a yes. My hand subconsciously clutched the hem of his shirt as I tilted my chin up to meet him. Stephen's smile didn't change, but his eyes gradually grew cold. It was my first time kissing someone, and my eyelashes couldn't help but tremble nervously. The instant before our lips touched, Stephen turned his head and dodged. Sorry, I'm not really comfortable with this. I stared at the screen without blinking, my hands growing stiffer. Then the screen cut. The person holding the camera was now filming Stephen. It was one of his buddies. He grinned. What's the deal, Stephen? I was hoping to film something interesting. Why'd you dodge? Stephen frowned impatiently. The thought of kissing a guy just makes me sick. The video ended. My roommate added in a low voice, Stephen posted this publicly on the school's social media page. Now everyone knows. And a lot of people are trashing you in the comments, saying how disgusting gay people are. My mind went blank. I listened without any reaction. For a moment, I couldn't process the information my roommate was giving me. All I knew was that all my patience and endurance seemed to have been for nothing. They would only get worse. Another clap of thunder ripped through the sky, unleashing the storm. I don't know when, but I was suddenly standing there alone. Without any warning, raindrops began to fall, slamming against me. That's when Stephen appeared. His gaze was calm and distant, as if he didn't think he'd done anything wrong at all. I stared at Stephen through the downpour. My emotions broke in an instant. I rushed up to him, knocked the umbrella from his hand, and threw a punch at his face. Stephen, how far are you going to torture me? What the hell did I ever do to you? Seeing me like this now, you must be satisfied, right? We were both soaked to the bone by the rain, but I was still the pathetic one. The rain blurred my vision, and the negative emotions that had been building up for so long erupted uncontrollably. David. Stephen ignored my breakdown, his voice cold. I'm helping you atone for what you did to Claire. With that rain, I let all my emotions out. I don't remember the details clearly. My last impression was looking at Stephen as if he were a stranger. My tone was serious. Stephen, I really regret ever liking you. Say that again? A rage that even the storm couldn't hide suddenly rose from Stephen. I had no more energy to fight with him. I turned and walked away into the rain, leaving Stephen to his fury behind me. I filed a complaint with the school for violation of my privacy and right of publicity, demanding they take the video down. And in one go, I reported Stephen and his shitty friends to the police. Things were quiet for a while after that. It seemed like everything had gone back to normal. But then, Stephen and Claire went public with their relationship. I became the butt of everyone's jokes. It was a large lecture class with 4 sections combined. Stephen sat in the middle, holding hands with Claire. They were surrounded by his jeering friends. Looks like a trip to the police station didn't teach them a lesson. The main point of the class was for each group to present their PowerPoint. I don't know if it was a coincidence or something else, but Claire's topic was, how do you view homosexuality? I have a question. She stood at the podium, her gaze sweeping past me to land on Stephen, and she smiled sweetly. Stephen, if a gay man publicly confessed his feelings for you, how would you feel? The room held its breath. Many eyes turned towards me. Stephen didn't even glance at me, playing along with Claire's game. His tone was cold with a hint of mockery. Disgusted. If you're not going to use it, you might as well chop it off. Claire blushed and said coquettishly, Stephen, don't be crude in class. The boy smirked, obediently apologized, and sat down. The two of them were openly flirting in class. But the next second, Claire called on me out of the blue. So, David, do you agree with Stephen's point of view? It seemed that ever since the video incident, I rarely felt embarrassed anymore. I stood up calmly and looked her straight in the eye. Before I answer you, I'd like to ask you a question. I remember you're left-handed. Since your right hand has pretty much lost its main function, would you chop it off? If you refuse, aren't you implicitly disagreeing with Stephen's point of view? Claire's intention was probably to humiliate me in public. She hadn't expected to be the one put on the spot. You, she glared, unable to form a complete sentence. Probably holding a grudge from class, she quietly positioned herself behind me in the crowded hallway after the bell rang. When I reached the top of the stairs, she kicked me down, staying out of the security camera's view. Claire still had some sense left. She chose the last flight of stairs. I tumbled down in front of everyone, but I wasn't seriously hurt. I could still stand up, limping. What's going on? My advisor happened to show up and saw the whole thing. Claire smiled innocently. Professor David fell down on his own. Before I could even defend myself, she continued. David and I are practically family. I wouldn't lie about him. I let out a cold laugh. It was just loud enough for everyone's eyes to focus on me. Professor, David. I don't know when, but Stephen had walked up beside me. He warned me under his breath, if Claire gets hurt again because of you, I will make you pay. You know I can make the next 2 years of your life here worse than a stray dog's. What were you saying, David? My advisor pressed. I felt like I could see a sword hanging over my head, waiting for my judgment. I said I was pushed by my sister, Claire. I turned to look at Stephen. What, you want to stand up for your girlfriend? If you have the guts, then just finish me. With that, I walked away without looking back. But the outcome of the incident didn't change. Stephen's father was the biggest donor to the school, and he completely buried the matter. And because of my leg injury, I looked pathetic trying to get up the stairs in the academic building. I ran into Stephen and Claire again. They looked down on me from above, as if watching a clown. Claire smiled faintly. Sorry, David. When Dad found out I accidentally pushed you, he yelled at me for a whole 10 minutes. I guess that's his way of getting back at them for you. For my fractured bone, the man who called himself my father gave Claire nothing more than a slap on the wrist. As Stephen passed by me, he sneered. You? Do I even need to finish you? People like them seem to get their kicks from humiliating others. My leg hadn't healed yet, but in the undercurrents of campus drama, the school's confessions page was buzzing again. Hey confessions, I'm a transfer student. Can you help me find a student? He's really good looking. Can't remember much else. No offense, but if he's single, can I pursue him? The profile picture was clearly a guy. Everyone subconsciously assumed they were talking about Claire. For those few days, Stephen looked pissed off. He was constantly trying to find out which department the transfer student was in. Until a certain public lecture. A tall, well-built guy stopped next to my seat. Hey, is this seat taken? I hesitated for a moment, then shook my head. The guy sat down and smiled, resting his forehead on his hand. I finally found you, he said. During the class, the confessions page updated again. Hey confessions, no need to look anymore, I found. He's sitting right next to me. Soon, many people were frequently glancing our way, including Stephen. He was staring daggers at me. But the next second, the guy beside me blocked his view. Hey, my name's Dylan. Dylan was very direct. He showed me the confessions page on his phone and told me it was love at first sight. To be honest, after everything I'd been through recently, my first reaction was that this guy was just messing with me too. So I quickly looked away from his screen. Polite but distant. Well, I'm sorry, but I'm not interested. Dylan turned off his phone and smiled coolly. Well, I'm just trying to figure out how to win you over, right? I looked at him for a couple of seconds. His laid-back, cocky vibe felt increasingly familiar. On a whim, I asked, "Are you gay?" Dylan denied it. Liking you is just liking you. What does it have to do with being gay or straight? It was almost the exact same line Stephen had used. I let out a low laugh and didn't take his words to heart anymore. After class, to avoid Dylan and the looks from people who were enjoying the drama, I ignored the pain in my leg, grabbed my books, and quickly left. But Stephen still caught up to me. What did you two talk about in class? Stephen's probing gaze sized me up. What's it to you? Get lost. For once, he didn't get angry, just stared at me intently. After a long moment, I heard him say something absurd. David, why aren't you a girl? I couldn't help but laugh out loud. Stephen, are you losing your mind? The guy suddenly took a step toward me. I instinctively backed away, but accidentally twisted my injured leg. Is your leg still not healed? Stephen's expression was grave, as if he was genuinely worried about me. Let me carry you to the nurse's office, okay? He said, reaching for my hand. Stephen. I didn't move, just called his name calmly. He stopped. The breeze lifted a corner of his jacket. Only then did I notice he was wearing the same outfit as when we first met. But I no longer had that fluttery feeling. What do you think you're doing right now? Slap me a few times and then offer me a piece of candy? Stephen's eyes showed a hint of confusion. That's not. But that was all he could say. He couldn't explain himself. In the tense silence, he pursed his lips. Suddenly, he laughed self-deprecatingly. You probably won't believe this, but this is most likely a habit I picked up from when we were together. This time, before I could say something sarcastic, he beat me to it. Stephen took a step back, his eyes dark and unreadable. If a guy falls for the exact type of person he despises the most, doesn't that make him pathetic? It was a veiled attempt to test the waters. I pretended not to see the slight nervousness in his expression. Yes, you are indeed pathetic. Almost as soon as I finished speaking, Stephen lowered his eyes, hiding his emotions. He forced a smile, feigning nonchalance. Right? For a long time after that, Stephen didn't show up in front of me again. I didn't think much of that day. I just figured it was a whim of Stephen's, or maybe his possessiveness acting up. In contrast, Dylan started popping up everywhere in my life. Even in my dorm room, he stood in front of my bed with his suitcase. Oh, David, so your bed is across from mine. I was speechless. It was a normal sentence, but with his drawn-out tone and increasingly suggestive gaze, it was hard not to let your mind wander. Our dorm was a 4-person room with loft beds and desks underneath. Guys rarely used bed curtains. But the first night Dylan moved in, he made no effort to hide it. Before lights out, he lay on his side, facing me, just staring. David, the other 2 roommates, happened to be in the washroom. It was just the 2 of us in the room. The moment he spoke, I had a bad feeling. "Shut up," I said, thinking I'd warned him in time. Then I turned to face the wall, my back to him. But Dylan acted as if he hadn't heard me. He continued what he was about to say. "This is our first night together. Good night." I took a deep breath, pulled the blanket up higher, and ignored him. But only I knew. I was trying to cover up my bright red ears. The next day, I had a class with Dylan, so we left together. Just as we stepped out of the dorm building, we saw Steven, who I hadn't seen in half a month. His gaze shifted back and forth between us, his eyes growing darker. "I'm curious, what's the reason for transferring universities?" He directed his attack at Dylan. Dylan smiled faintly. "It's definitely not because I'm a straight guy pretending to be gay to deceive and bully someone." I froze, surprised that he already knew about me and Steven. Steven's face immediately darkened, and he said nothing. "Is there anything else, straight guy? My roommate and I are heading to class." Dylan leaned casually against the door, his tone quite mocking. Steven's gaze turned cold. "David, you're comfortable rooming with someone who has a plan for you, and going to class with him?" I had a cigarette dangling from my lips and rubbed my temples. "Can you drop the interrogating tone? A good dog doesn't block the road." Steven stopped talking and silently made way for us. Just as I had taken a couple of steps, his voice called out to me again from behind. During the half-month I was gone, I traveled abroad with Claire, took her racing. We did almost everything a couple could do. I kept telling myself that if I had a normal relationship and didn't see you, those weird thoughts wouldn't grow. But in reality, every day I was away from school, I was thinking of you. Beside me, Dylan clicked his tongue in annoyance. Then I heard Steven, after all his build-up, finally reach his conclusion. "David, you can call me disgusting, I don't care, but I've genuinely fallen for you. I became the gay guy I once hated, all for you." Steven's confession was unexpected, but his condescending attitude hadn't changed at all. It was as if falling for me was a huge concession on his part, something I should be grateful for. Steven walked closer, circling around to face me. His tone was somewhat cautious. "I know I did a lot of things to hurt you, and you won't forgive me easily, so I plan on winning you back. Is that okay?" I studied the expression on the guy's face as if it were an academic subject. Compared to the first time, he did seem much more sincere. But I didn't believe him anymore. "But Steven," I looked up and asked him, "being pursued by the person you despise the most, wouldn't that be annoying? Like Steven in the past? Or like me now?" Dylan laughed out loud, as if mocking his naivety. Steven didn't have an answer, but that didn't mean he gave up. That night, when I got back to the dorm from the library, the roommate in the bed next to mine had been replaced by Steven. Dylan was furious. The tense atmosphere between them made the dorm room unbearable. Even our other roommate started avoiding the room to stay away from them. Most of the time, neither of them bothered me. But when I was getting ready to shower that night, Steven kept hesitating. He looked annoyed, frowning as he blocked my way. "David, don't you know this is a public shower? And it's packed with people at this hour. Let me take you somewhere else to shower, okay?" I shook my head and took a step back. "Will you ever stop? What is it you really want?" Steven looked irritated, but his averted gaze also seemed a bit guilty. It was one thing before. "But David, after that video was exposed, everyone knows you're gay. When you're standing naked in front of them, some of those guys who aren't picky will definitely have ideas about you." After a few seconds of a standoff, I saw that Steven had no intention of backing down. I couldn't help but smile a little and tell him the truth. "Steven, there are no gay guys on this floor. It's because of that video that they're afraid I'm some kind of creep and don't want to be in the shower at the same time as me. They ended up having my roommate tell me I can only go during a specific time slot. Stephen's face grew paler and paler. He seemed to want to apologize, but he didn't know where to start. I didn't know they would go that far. So now that you know, can you stay away from me? Because right now, seeing a clingy gay guy like you just makes me sick. I lowered my voice, saying each word clearly. Stephen's eyes reddened. Does this mean no matter how I try to make it up to you, you'll never forgive me? Why do you have to push things to the absolute limit before you suddenly realize you should ask for forgiveness? I found it absurd. Stephen, if you were me, would you forgive someone like you? He lowered his head and said nothing. After a long time, he finally stepped aside, his voice low and trembling. Sorry. I had a feeling that Stephen was about to give up. The next morning, I went to the library early. When I returned to the dorm, the spot next to me was occupied by my old roommate again. Stephen's stay had been so brief it felt like a dream, as if he had never been there at all. Because of Stephen, Claire came looking for me once. I had just left the library at night when she stopped me. The library was about to close, and there were only a few people on the path. David, you turned Stephen gay. You must be so proud of yourself, right? He dumped me now. Are you finally happy to see me become a joke? Why don't you just die, you freak? I didn't want to waste my time arguing with her. But when she saw I was going to ignore her and walk away, she completely lost it. She grabbed my sleeve and raised her hand to slap me. I quickly blocked it, grabbed her, and shoved her against the wall, not holding back. David, you dare to fight back? Claire's back hit the wall hard. I sneered and walked slowly towards her. Claire, your mother really spoiled you rotten. What do you want? She asked, looking at me warily. I lifted my hand and gently brushed aside a strand of her loose hair, saying nonchalantly, it's so late, and this is a perfect blind spot for cameras. It would be easy for me to do whatever I want to you, wouldn't it? As I spoke, my fingertips slid to her shoulder, tracing light circles. Don't you like guys? Claire, who had been so arrogant just moments ago, was now trying to act calm, but her body was frozen stiff. I smiled gently, my fingers caressing the side of her neck. I'm gay, but that doesn't stop me from doing something to you. Does it? Claire struggled fruitlessly, tears already welling up in her eyes. I'm sorry, David. Don't do this to me. We're siblings, we're related by blood. My hand on her neck tightened slightly. Don't come looking for trouble with me again. Do you understand, sis? Otherwise, you better make sure you're never caught alone. Her expression was one of unconcealed fear, and she nodded hastily. I took a step back and let go. I watched dispassionately as Claire fled in a panic. Just as I was about to leave, someone stepped out from a short distance away. I never knew you had such a dominant side. Dylan shook the phone in his hand. I couldn't reach you, and it's late, so I thought I'd come to the library to walk you back. Make sure you were safe. My heart, which had been as still as stagnant water, felt a jolt of warmth at that moment. I had a similar unexpected flutter not long ago, also because of Dylan. After thanking him, I still corrected him. I'm a grown man. Do I need you to walk me home? He chuckled and nodded. I see that now. You're pretty good at protecting yourself. Dylan's gaze dropped to my neck, his voice lowering. So, you like choking people? What about being choked? What a psycho. The faint flutter of my heart stopped abruptly. I ignored him and walked away. Dylan leisurely followed behind me, adding playfully, fine, if you don't like being choked, you don't like it. You can choke me instead. The guy behind me seemed even more wild and unrestrained than Stephen. But his unreliable exterior always contradicted his true nature. For example, when I went to take a shower, he would deliberately avoid being there. He never used the excuse of being the same gender to suggest we go to the showers at the same time. But often, when I came out, he would be standing right at the entrance. What are you doing here? Didn't you already shower? Dylan was leaning against the wall playing on his phone. He only put it away when I came out. He reached up and wiped a drop of water that had slid down my cheek from my hair. Even though you said everyone on this floor is straight, I'm still standing guard here just in case some creep tries to watch you. It makes me feel better. Thinking of this, I slowed my pace. I waited for him to catch up, and then we walked side by side. The soft, misty glow of the moon that night enveloped everything around us, making it all seem hazy and unreal. It felt as if it were just me and the boy beside me in the entire world. For the first time, I wanted to cast aside all my hesitations and try again. Claire's years of resentment towards me couldn't be completely scared away by a single threat. But she didn't dare do anything openly. So, when I was surrounded by a group of people looking for trouble, she was nowhere to be seen. In the cafeteria, a few guys who were all over 6 feet 3 inches walked towards me with their trays. As they passed me, the leader suddenly bumped his shoulder into me. His tray crashed to the floor. "Hey asshole, watch where you're going." Then he gave me a hard shove. This was no accident. I noticed he had deliberately bumped into me. "Sorry," I said, just wanting to de-escalate. But he wouldn't let me leave. "You think a simple sorry is going to fix this? Right now, you can either go buy everything from the food station I just got my meal from, or you can get on your knees and lick the floor clean. Then I'll accept your apology. How about it?" This malicious way of starting trouble was very similar to someone I knew. I looked up at the group. "Did Claire send you?" The guys were stunned, probably not expecting me to guess the person behind this so quickly. I studied them, they looked somewhat familiar. As I searched my memory, I stalled for time. Bullying someone in a public place. I can call the police, you know? You want a mark on your permanent record before you even graduate? The big guy in the lead hesitated. Clearly all brawn and no brains. I accidentally noticed calluses in roughly the same place on all their hands and instantly remembered. "I think I've seen you guys in the sports club. You're freshmen, right?" The big guy grunted a non-committal aha. "If you fulfill 2 years of credits in the sports club, you can skip your electives." And as it happened, the president of the sports club was my roommate. I used this as a bargaining chip. "How much is Claire paying you?" "It's probably just enough for a few meals. I can get you out of your electives entirely. How about it? Tell me, what did Claire want you to do to me?" The big guy hesitated, weighed his options, and chose to switch sides. The guy's voice was deep, and even his normal speech sounded like shouting. "Either beat you up, or make you lick the food off the floor." I gave a nonchalant smile. Just as I was about to say something, a furious voice roared from behind me. "Lick your moms." Dylan must have only heard that last part and thought I was being harassed. Without a second thought, he grabbed a nearby tray with someone's leftovers and slammed it onto the big guy's face. I was speechless. I had it all sorted out. After a chaotic brawl, the big guy was holding his bloody nose, on the verge of tears. What the hell is even happening? They helped the big guy leave first. I turned back to look at Dylan. I was awesome, right? Taking on 4 athletes by myself. His eyes were bright with youthful arrogance. "You know what this means, David? It means I have great stamina." "Oh, shut up." I looked at the bruises on his face and couldn't help but laugh. I dragged him to the school nurse to get his cuts treated. The boy, enduring the pain of his injuries, was rambling on and on about how amazing he was. That was 1 against 4. David, they probably weighed 1,000 pounds combined, right? And I still took them down easily. 1,000 pounds. I sighed helplessly and nodded. "Yeah, you were amazing. The most amazing person I've seen at this school." Dylan nodded vigorously, a wide grin spreading across his face. He could barely hide the tail wagging behind him. He looked exactly like a dog proudly showing its owner a frisbee it just caught for the first time. Not wanting to crush his confidence, I didn't tell him I had the situation almost resolved. By the time we got back to the dorm, it was almost lights out. Dylan, looking beat up from the day, went straight to the showers. At this hour, he was probably the only one there. But he had probably just gotten in when the lights went out and the water shut off. Just in case, I turned on my phone's flashlight and went to check on him. "Dylan, the water's off. Are you not done yet?" I stood at the entrance without going in. There was a 2-second silence from inside. Then a hoarse voice spoke. "David, I think I got soap in my eyes. I can't open them. Can you?" He paused before continuing. "Can you bring me my towel?" I blinked, slowly saying, "Oh, we're both guys, nothing to be embarrassed about." I told myself as I walked in with his towel. I kept my flashlight and my eyes aimed squarely at Dylan's face. Not an inch lower. Here. Dylan took it. I was about to turn and leave. But the floor was wet, and I slipped, falling backward. I landed right in front of Dylan, staring right at his lap. I saw things I shouldn't have seen. Just then, Dylan put down the towel and opened his eyes. I instinctively looked up. Our eyes met. At that moment, my embarrassment reached its absolute peak. After a few chaotic minutes, Dylan casually rinsed his hair with cold water from the tap. Then we walked back to the dorm in mutual silence. On the way, Dylan suddenly spoke. It's pretty good, right? I mean, it's definitely way above the national average. I silently quickened my pace, putting distance between us. Dylan added in a small voice, for real, I looked up the data. That direct hit nearly killed me. My relationship with Dylan grew closer without me realizing it. The ambiguity between us was like a thin veil, easily torn away. But I was still hesitating, until I ran into Steven again. He had come out publicly and was dating a freshman. I don't know if it was my imagination, but I always felt that the freshman looked a bit like me. And Claire had become a complete joke. As a trade for the elective credits, I had the big guy from the cafeteria publicly expose all of Claire's actions on the confessions page. Claire's reputation was ruined, and the school even required her to take a year off. I heard that her mother, who cared more about appearances than anything, took her home and basically put her under house arrest for a long time. And there were already rumors that she was going to drop out. One evening, Dylan and I were taking a walk after dinner. We wandered near a small grove of trees. The sounds of activity made us stop. Maybe we should walk somewhere else? Dylan rubbed the back of his neck and suggested. I kept a straight face and nodded. But just as I took a step, I heard a familiar voice. The person inside was Steven. David, Dylan whipped his head around. Then, another guy's voice responded intermittently. I'm here, Steven. It was so disgusting. I instantly felt sick to my stomach. I was about to step away and wait for them to come out, but Dylan had already stormed in. Steven, are you disgusting or what? Getting off to fantasies of David, are you out of your fucking mind? By the time the three of them came out, I had composed myself. I looked at Steven indifferently. Steven, the only reason I've tolerated you until now is because when I lost my luggage on my first day of freshman year, you went back to the bus station and helped me find it. The boy with his head down suddenly looked up, a look of complete confusion on his face. What? It's normal that you don't remember, but I was grateful and I've remembered it until now. But the you of today has completely exhausted the last bit of patience I had for you. Steven was still staring at me, completely bewildered. It was Dylan beside me who suddenly exploded again. He was a firecracker. You fucking took credit for it? That was me. David, that was fucking me who got it back for you. Steven, you're a real piece of shit. With that, he landed a solid punch on Steven's face, leaving me frozen on the spot. I thought back to that day. A sophomore RA was comforting me. It's okay, we have the contact info for all the buses for new students. Steven has already gone to look for it, he'll definitely find it, don't worry. She told me to go back to my dorm and wait. Sure enough, when I got out of the shower, my luggage was already sitting outside my dorm room. No one told me who found it, so I assumed it was Steven. The sound of punches and kicks pulled me back to reality. Steven was groaning on the ground, basically being pinned and beaten by Dylan. Dylan, let's go. He's gotten what he deserves. Dylan had barged in without a second thought. Steven was terrified. Being startled in a situation like that, some things might not work so well for the rest of his life. Dylan took a deep breath, stopped, and left with me. I was the one who got it back for you. The boy suddenly stopped, lowered his head, and emphasized in a very soft voice. Yeah, I know that now, and I'm very grateful. Knowing it was you, I suddenly felt a sense of relief. Because it was you, everything makes sense. I was trying to figure out how to gently break through that final barrier between us. The boy sniffled. I heard a sob. I stopped and turned to look at him. Are you crying? Dylan's eyes were red, and he looked at me pitifully. You were supposed to like me. I saw you at the bus station, and then I saw the luggage left behind. I knew it was yours, so I immediately brought it to your school. I just forgot to get your contact info, and I forgot to ask your name before I left. And then you fell for someone else. By the end, he was practically bawling. Why is a guy who's almost 6 feet 3 inches such a crybaby? I cupped his face in my hands and comforted him gently. It's okay, Dylan. It's not too late for me to like you now, right? His eyes widened. What did you say? I could almost see his tail standing straight up behind him. I said, Dylan, wanna be my boyfriend? The tears in the boy's eyes vanished instantly, and he nodded eagerly. His tail wagged non-stop. I took his hand. David, I like you. He suddenly confessed seriously. Dylan said it was indeed love at first sight. The essence of love at first sight is superficial. But Dylan showed me that love at first sight and lifelong devotion can coexist. End of main story. David Dylan's story. Even though David wasn't technically a first love anymore, he wasn't much better off than the innocent puppy, Dylan. Their first date could only be described as utter chaos. In the restaurant, Dylan was frantically taking care of David. Lexi, try this. Stop. David looked up. Don't call me that. It sounds like a little girl's name. But Dylan misunderstood. He pressed his lips together, his ears turning a little red as if he'd thought of something. Babe. David almost sprayed a mouthful of fish soup in his face. Don't call me that either. Dylan's voice dropped. I can't call you that either? David had a reasonable suspicion that he was deliberately playing pitiful. Ever since Dylan cried that one time and David confessed to him, he had learned to act pathetic in front of David. Sure enough, David was silent for 2 seconds before giving in. There was a hint of self-abandonment in his tone. Fine, call me whatever you want. Dylan's puppy ears perked up. Okay, babe. During the meal, a flamboyant guy set his sights on Dylan. He walked over with a glass of wine. Hey, I lost a dare. Can I share a drink with you? Dylan didn't even look up, continuing to pick the bones out of the fish on the plate. Sorry. The guy's voice turned pouty. Please? Otherwise, I'll have to take a penalty shot. Dylan was getting annoyed. His boyfriend sitting across from him was watching the whole thing with a detached expression, like a complete stranger. Seeing that he was still unmoved, the guy was about to grab his sleeve. If you're not blind, Dylan and the guy both turned their heads. David's eyes were filled with mockery. You should be able to see that he's my boyfriend. The guy was embarrassed. It wasn't that he hadn't seen, it was just an excuse to meet Dylan. Dylan's face was filled with unconcealed pride, and he raised an eyebrow at the guy. You hear that? I'm taken. The guy shot them a dirty look, annoyed. Oh really? I couldn't tell you two were a couple. I thought you were just two sad sacks. He stormed off, his long earring chain swinging from his left ear. Seeing that the pest was gone, David didn't bother with his comment and continued to eat the fish that Dylan had deboned for him. But Dylan took his words to heart. That afternoon, they went to a movie. Dylan was silent for 2 seconds at the ticket counter, then chose the most unpopular movie. David didn't care, he just assumed Dylan liked it. As Dylan expected, the theater was practically empty. There was only a mother with her young son in the front row. Dylan pulled David to the second to last row. Can you see from this far back? David asked, confused. I can see fine. Maybe it was his imagination, but he thought Dylan's voice sounded a little hoarse. The movie was incredibly boring. Just as David was about to doze off, Dylan, sitting next to him, took his hand. David. He sounded unusually formal. David opened his eyes. Dylan was already leaning over him. They looked at each other, both at a loss. I want to kiss you. The puppy stuttered when he was nervous. David's face was unreadable, but his eyes blinked rapidly. In reality, his brain had completely shut down. Dylan didn't know what "oh" meant, but it couldn't stop his desire to kiss him. So, without asking again, he slowly leaned in and gently pressed his lips against David's. He was like a natural at this. Dylan took the lead, slowly parting his lips and exploring inside. He played with David's lips and tongue. Their breathing grew heavier. David frowned slightly, his lung capacity no match for Dylan's, and he was getting dizzy. He raised a hand, wanting to push him away, but Dylan held the back of his neck, continuing their entanglement. It wasn't until Dylan saw that David was about to pass out that he reluctantly pulled back a little. "Are you trying to devour me?" David gasped for air, frowning at him. Dylan stared at his lips, offering a very insincere apology. "Sorry." A few seconds later, he spoke again. "Have you caught your breath? I want to kiss you again." David just wanted to sew his mouth shut. By the time they left the movie theater, it was past dusk. Dylan was already planning his next move. He saw a jewelry store and dragged David inside. David gritted his teeth, forced to follow. He was already considering putting Dylan on a leash. "Do you have couples rings?" Dylan asked. The saleswoman glanced at the two guys in front of her, unfazed. She smiled and started showing them options. Seeing that David in the back seemed uninterested, she enthusiastically offered him a glass of water. "You must have eaten something spicy earlier. Here's some water for you." David looked at his reflection in the glass. Only then did he notice his lips, red and swollen from Dylan's kisses. "I'm not thirsty, thanks." "For fuck's sake, is Dylan part dog?" David, who was usually unshakable, had a rare crack in his composure. Dylan was too busy picking out rings to notice what was happening. David had no choice but to swallow his frustration. But this only led to Dylan becoming even more brazen. That night, they were aimlessly wandering the streets. Then Dylan stopped again. He tugged on David's sleeve. "Babe, let's not go back tonight. Okay?" His eyes burned as he stared at a nearby hotel. David sneered and yanked his sleeve back. "Didn't bring my ID." He was really pushing it. Dylan blinked. "I brought mine." David crossed his arms and looked at him. "I said I didn't bring mine." Dylan looked embarrassed, as if steam was coming off the top of his head. "Yours? I brought yours too." His presumptuousness was suddenly met with a barrage of cold sarcasm from David. But despite the scolding, the puppy still managed to lure his babe into the hotel. Their first time was painful for both of them. But what left David speechless was why Dylan, hovering above him, had to cry at a time like this. The puppy sniffled, though his movements didn't stop. He said, "Crying 'cause it feels good." That night, David was covered in bite marks. And Dylan was the one crying, but David was the one who was exhausted.